So my name's Andy Thomas. I'm a freelance artist from Australia. I'm interested in the intersection between nature and technology. I did the graphics for the Total Chaos conference today. A little bit of a background about myself. I live on an island in southern Australia with my strange dog. And I record bird sounds and make animations out of them on my computer. On my computer. The dog's real though. I made a name for myself creating these highly digital, highly detailed organic art pieces using ZBrush and Photoshop. And in recent years I've just started getting into the animation side of things. So here's an example of some of my animation work. I've done stage visuals for bands like Empire of the Sun and various other bands, and New York coming up soon, and the government of Finland and various other commissions that I've done throughout the years. I've also exhibited work overseas in various galleries. In my early years, I was into Dungeons and Dragons and Commodore 64. Remember that one? Tape drive. And graphics. I found this box just before I left. It's like, the whole family can enjoy the Commodore 64. Get into the stock markets there. It's brilliant. I got into graffiti in my early years. And into going to underground warehouse rave parties in Melbourne. It was quite an awesome scene back then. There was general population didn't really know about it, and we all kind of had our own little thing going on. And it was a big influence on my life, the electronic music and dancing and stuff. And we had this warehouse out in the industrial area of Melbourne that I used to do UV artwork and stuff, and I love these old flyers. I started doing flyers myself in about year 1998, and I was doing graphic design at the time, so I was writing into like typefaces and all that kind of stuff. So I did heaps of these flyers. This is all my early stuff. And I've been exhibiting artwork at festivals around the world for quite a few years. And here's some of my early digital artwork. This is the very first piece I did. It's like a lawnmower, kind of photographed and mixed with stuff. You can see some of my early pieces here. Influence from graphic design. I've gradually got better and better at the 3D stuff, and had influences from Geiger and things like that. And as you can see, got better and better with the technical side of things, with the 3D stuff using V-Ray. And some of these pictures here, like I always had this idea in my mind. go to electronic parties and stuff and listen to the sounds, I've got this idea of this moving structure in my mind where it's like a moving sound structure. So this is kind of the closest thing that I've got to it. I'm kind of creating more animations of it. I haven't quite got there yet, but we're getting there, you know. I've got more and more into the nature side of things and doing lots of sketches. And I started to try and create these things in 3D programs using ZBrush and mixing it with photography. So I go out on nature trips and take photos of plants and insects and kind of mix them all together. Some examples of that, just heaps of detail, getting that in there with ZBrush and sculpting stuff. And one day I decided to kind of combine all of my pictures together into one big giant structure, and I was quite pleased with the result, and I started doing more and more of these mechanical ones and all different types of kind of detailed tree structures. Take a long time to do, a couple of months to create kind of thing. And as I was doing these, I kind of realised how beautifully like things like moss and trees blended together. And I started kind of doing a bit more research about fractal theories in nature, and I guess most of you are probably familiar with fractals. It's this idea of self-repeating patterns throughout nature on different scales. So this is a beautiful example. It's like a type of cauliflower. You can see all the fractals in there. It's quite amazing. And we see these all throughout nature, these repeating patterns. It's quite beautiful. And things like rivers and mountains and lightning and blood cells all have these branching out structures. It's almost like it's kind of like a language threaded through the universe, you know what I mean? And I was really fascinated by this concept and did lots of research on it, and this is a great example of like a galaxy and a hurricane, kind of, you know, massively different scales, but the same kind of patterns that you see. And this idea of self-similarity. So a similar object is exactly approximately similar to a part of itself. So that same kind of theory, of fractal theory. So I started taking my montages and I montaged my montages and made patterns out of them and got some really interesting results, quite powerful results, heaps of detail, just insane amounts of detail, just lots of patience. I'd sit there for a long time creating these things. I was interested in things like hyperbolic shapes, and when I was in high school I hated mathematics, and now I'm using mathematics all the time, so it's interesting. Where I live, I walk along the beach and I find all examples of these things, of hyperbolic shapes in nature, and take photographs of them. And recently I've discovered how to create some of these things with computers. If I can switch back to the videos, I'm not sure if that's going to wreck things or not, but is that going to work? So this is using Houdini and exported and rendered with V-Ray. So you get these beautiful kind of shapes created by mathematics, really, and Vex code in Houdini. And this is new to me, so I can kind of get under the hood and get a basic understanding of how they work, but I couldn't construct one from scratch just yet. But getting there. So I started experimenting and making artwork out of these growth solvers, getting some interesting results. And a lot of the time when I'm doing my artwork about nature, I find that I'm stuck on my computer inside doing artwork about nature, and there's this real disconnect. So sometimes if I can't go for walks in nature, I'll go to somewhere like the aquarium and take heaps of photos. So here's an example of that. I go in and some beautiful hyperbolic shapes and fractal shapes there. And I make artwork out of them by create sketches and stuff afterwards, and I create these interesting artwork pieces using ZBrush and photography and combining them together. And you can see some of the graffiti influence in some of these things from my early years. I go to the museum and take photos of crystals. Insects and crystals belong together, definitely. And frogs, frog pictures. I take things in nature, and I'm not really trying to recreate nature as such, it's all abstract kind of stuff. So like that, for example, created in ZBrush would just be one tiny little piece in my artwork. And people are probably familiar with the ZBrush workflow, and here I'm creating a lionfish, and I'll use that in my artwork and create these detailed montages. And again, you can see like in this particular piece I've used like pictures of galaxies and coral and insects and kind of mixed them all up together, and that kind of works really nicely. So I made like a whole stack series of these kind of nature distorted images. See there's like moss and all sorts of things mixed together. And here's an example of how I create one of my tree pieces. So that's a photo taken in Queensland of this beautiful tree, and I'll just do sketches on top of it, and just to get a rough idea of what I want to create. And then I'll rough out shapes, basic polygon shapes, and carve stuff in ZBrush. And with this one, I just went crazy with the ZBrush and spent just like maybe 4 or 5 weeks just solidly, creating this really detailed stuff. Kind of insane almost, the amount of detail I went into. And here's an example of so I've just got this basic model, and I start carving, sculpting with my Wacom tablet, more and more detail, influence from Geiger and all sorts of kind of sci-fi stuff. More and more detail. Took a very long time. And then painting the whole thing, adding lights to it, all done in 3D Studio Max and ZBrush and rendered with V-Ray. So that's the end result. Really complex, detailed picture. And here's some close-ups of some of the little pieces in there. And I'll take photos of things like lichen, and this is an interesting example. It's like this alien little world. I'll get right in there with my macro lens. I'll add lights to it, and knowing how I'm going to use it afterwards. I'll even create some lichen in ZBrush and mix it with real photos of lichen, twisting nature and twisting reality into forms that I want it to look like. I go on nature walks in different parts of the world. This is New Zealand, so I do sketches along the way, take photos, spend like a week in the forest, going around different parts of the world. And after this trip, I thought to myself, what does the sound of New Zealand rainforest look like? So it's an abstract concept, visualizing sound. It's kind of like interpretive, really. But this is my interpretation of some of the sounds that I heard in the forests and some details. And I've got a little making of it. I'll switch back under. So I'll skim through this a little bit quickly, but basically sculpting heaps of stuff in ZBrush. I'll get like textures from all the photos I've taken, and I'll paint that onto all these little pieces. Lots of time doing that. Adding fibres to it. Then I'll take it into 3D Studio Max and do a whole lot of work in there, doing test renders. And I'll actually sit there with the lasso tool in Photoshop and click around every little piece of moss and lichen, which is completely insane. It takes a long time. I could probably get like a blue screen or something and carry it with me, but it takes away from the look somehow. I like to do it the hard way. So I'm sketching stuff on top of it at the same time. So building this picture up, thinking about how the sounds are going to look like. I've got quite a good eye for knowing how these photos are going to blend with each other before I put them together. Again, clicking around all these paths. And I've discovered this program, Chaotica, which does some beautiful fractal kind of sound images that you can get from it. And I see like sounds as like flashing lights and colours in my mind, so this is a perfect program to kind of capture that, I feel, and can get some really beautiful results with doing that. So I'm constantly drawing stuff on top. Having ridiculous amounts of detail. And again, I like the idea of mixing things in different scales, like I was talking about before with the fractal kind of theories and stuff. So I've got like little bits of seaweed, and I've even mixed like this lichen again, warping stuff as I go along, just to make it fit. I'll even get pictures of galaxies and use those as textures, and copy that in and get some beautiful results out of it. Again, like the idea of things working on different scales. Building up the final image. So, I can't really remember. It took a long time.
You kept pausing it, I
Yeah. So, and I started to think to myself, I wonder if I can start creating some of these things with particle effects and animation. So this was one of the results of that. This is one of my first attempts at it. Distorted them in audio software to create an electronic version. So after I did this one, I decided to kind of strip it back a bit, and here's some of the, I'll quickly show you some of the background to this one. So I'll get reference from different sources and draw heaps of sketches, and then I'll do little tests. That one was using fume effects and just making, I think it was meshed with frost and various other things. Again, looking at textures in nature, like bark and stuff like that. There I was using soft image to, that got killed, so moved away from that. And this is an interesting one, so it's like Australian wildflowers, and drawing heaps of sketches and getting ideas about influences from nature, and then recreating it with the particles. I love drawing these sketches first to get my ideas down. I'll create heaps of mood boards, just heaps of reference and stuff, inspiration. And after that, I kind of thought to myself, I'll experiment with just stripping it right back and being less complex. And this is a whale sound, so it's like getting the waveform of the whale sound, and every time it makes a sound, it emits particles. More and more experiments with like activating graphics with waveforms, and just I think this one was like just using After Effects, sound keys. And then I've decided to experiment with using Phoenix FT to have liquid that was going to be like audio reactive liquid. So this is the result of that. So basically what's going on here is I've got the bird sounds that I've recorded, and I'm taking them to Ableton. And distorting them with filters and stuff. And then using the waveform in 3D Studio Max as a trigger. So I've got a basic geometry, and I'm using the audio float controller to change the size of the scale of the structure, the geometry, and then using the geometry as an emitter in Phoenix FD, and then sucking the particles back in again. Pretty simple really, but these are all experimentations, I guess, really, at this stage. I'm getting the hang of switching over this now. So I did more and more of these, and some of the early experiments I did was just using electronic sounds. So again, with this particular one, I'm using the audio float controller to create a whole stack of it's like a visual sound structure. So this is the result of that. basically the audio flow controller is telling the crystals to move up and down the z-axis and also light up at the same time. And each little crystal is associated with each part of the track of the sound, the riff. And I really liked the TB303, so this is one of the really first pieces of animations that I did. And this is really loud. Turn it down a bit. Using 3ds Max's audio flow controller I found quite limiting. So I started delving into Houdini a little bit about a year ago, and this is the same kind of sound structure except using Houdini using the channel operators in Houdini. It's a lot more flexible. So basically what's going on there is just using a fit expression in here from the channel operator, telling the birth of particles to go from 0 to like 500,000 or something, and every time a waveform happens, it emits particles. So after experimenting with electronic sounds, I decided to delve into what a bird sound would look like, going back to nature again. And where I live on Phillip Island, there's heaps of beautiful birds. So I've just been drawing lots of sketches and starting there. And this is one of the first examples of a bird sound that I tried to recreate. This is done years ago, just a turkey sound. I was using Phoenix FD for that. And I really like this idea of velocity vectors and how beautiful they are. And when I see sound, I'm seeing motion as well. I see sound as a moving kind of structure. So I started creating all these sketches, utilising like velocity vectors and sketching out velocity. And at this point, I had a bit more of an understanding about particle effects. So I'm thinking about that as I'm doing my sketches, drawing pyro effects and stuff, and getting these concepts going. And I'm not the first one to delve into this, as Van Gogh is a really interesting example of, he was painting velocity vectors here, which is interesting. And futurism I was obsessed with in high school, and around this time they were experimenting with visualising movement. And this one here, Near Descending Staircase, is a really good example of capturing movement by painting it. And this is a beautiful example of, as well, of just frozen in time. of movement. So I thought I'd kind of do the same thing and get a bird sound, and this is like a frozen bird sound. So I'm thinking about the movement of this thing as I'm doing it, but it's frozen in time just to experiment with. I've rendered this in V-Ray. I think I've got Krakatoa particles on top there. This was done quite a while ago. It's hard to remember. Again, like looking at things in nature, hyperbolic shapes and things like seaweed and stuff, and trying to replicate them into these beautiful kind of 3D forms. And some of my first, this is my first example of trying to recreate this in an animated way. So using the waveforms to trigger particle effects. So after that, I had a lot of people come to me wanting bird sound animations, which was good for me because I started getting lots of commissions and stuff. Can you do bird sound animations with me? So the Institute for Sound and Vision in the Netherlands commissioned me to do some bird sound animations. So I've just got heaps of reference first up, doing sketches and stuff. And then I created this piece for these guys using these sound archives that they had. So there's a nightingale and a canary. So again, I'm using the waveform of the bird sound and triggering animation and particles. Canary. It's like a demented bird sound structured creature. It gets challenging when you've got really fast sounds to make them activate things. So after that, I went on a big journey a couple of years ago, and I went to Thailand and Finland and Brazil. I went from hot to cold to hot again. I went to Thailand first. I had a guide showing me around, doing sketches and stuff as I go, taking photos of lots of little things as I'm going. Then I got to Finland, where the government there, the Nature Institute, commissioned me to travel around Finland and record bird sounds and make animations out of them to play on their big screen there. So that was a really good project to do. I've got beautiful forests there in Finland. So I go around with my macro lens and take heaps of photos of little details and draw sketches and do little quick kind of roughs in my 3D software. I really like this photo. Again, it's going back to that thing of self-similarity. I was on the plane and I'm looking out at these clouds, and then at 0.39 feet this moss looked just like the clouds, so I thought that was quite fascinating. I went right up to the Arctic Circle and recorded this bird, a snow grouse, and took heaps of photos and sketches, and creating stuff in 3D software at the same time, little sketches as I go. And that's what I did with these pieces. Again, taking photos of lots of little things, details in nature. I love the textures in the ice and things like that. Lots of sketches. And this is a black woodpecker, so I've done this little quick sketch, and that's the bird there, and I managed to get a good recording of that one, and this was my, yeah. So again, just using Phoenix FD to create a fluid simulation. And then it flies off into the distance. So after Finland, there's a few more bird sounds that I did. Song thrush. After Finland, I travelled to the Amazon in Brazil. So it was quite a contrast to go from really cold to steaming hot jungle. And that's really ridiculous photo there. But I was basically thawing out after the cold of Finland. I organised all this kind of stuff at the last minute, and it all worked out pretty well, but it was a big thing to do, to travel to the Amazon by myself. I had a guide there who was showing me around though. He didn't really speak much English, but that was a challenge. But he was an ornithologist, so he was able to take me around to different places in the Amazon and find some beautiful birds. I'm taking photos of stuff as I go. Cool. I like that photo. This bird here is a beautiful bird, bird of paradise that we tracked into the jungle to find. And I didn't really have the photographic equipment to take photos of birds, but we managed to get some good shots of this one. And I made a series of animations of these bird sounds using particle effects. So here's a really simple example of that. It's like lot of rendering involved as well. I don't know, some of them are quicker than others. Like, I could do one in probably about 3 days, including the rendering. So, yeah, so, and that was played at this render festival in Peru, which I thought was a good synchronicity for the project. And finally, just recently, Bjork has commissioned me to, she's licensed the work for her concert tour coming up in a few weeks, so that's where I'm off to next. So all that travel to the Amazon paid off really in the end. And that's pretty much it.